Fishing and aquaculture gear is often abandoned, lost, or discarded at sea. Known as ghost gear, it is one of the most serious problems facing our oceans. Ghost gear remains largely out of sight. Out of sight, that is, until it returns to the coast in places like McNabs and Lalor Islands Provincial Park in the mouth of Halifax Harbour. Located close to busy commercial fishing grounds, the islands are a magnet for old fishing nets, rope, and lobster traps. Ghost fishing gear accounts for much of the large debris stranded on our beaches. And as storms become more frequent and intense due to climate change, more and more gear seems to arrive each year.
Fishers use a lot of gear to support their practices, and not all of it always comes back to shore for a variety of reasons, usually acting in combination with one another. The first being that the marine environment is incredibly dynamic, and environmental conditions can pose challenges to their practices. For example, if there's a storm or an extreme weather event that may displace the gear.
Fishing gear is also often lost when its mooring lines are severed by the propellers of ships and boats. It is called ghost gear because it continues to fish like a ghost. When a trap is lost at sea, for instance, it continues to catch lobster. They in turn become bait for fish and other crustaceans, and a destructive cycle of ghost fishing begins. Some traps remain on the seafloor, fishing indiscriminately, but storms drive others toward the coast. Eventually, many of these traps wash ashore, along with rope and nets and other marine trash. Mooring lines and buoys can remain at sea for years and can entangle marine mammals like the endangered northern right whale. Small fragments can snare seabirds and other marine wildlife. Further storms can wash ghost gear back into the ocean, where it continues to trap marine life. By doing so, the gear reduces the number of fish and crustaceans that are available for harvest.
More often than not, gear ends up accumulating in certain areas based on how the water is moving and the seafloor characteristics, which is why you see certain accumulation areas on certain beaches where, even if it's clean, the next few days more will wash ashore.
In this area here is mainly the entrance to Halifax Harbour, and that's due by shipping, naval exercises, pleasure craft, fishing boats. There's no one set of blame.
McNabs and Lalor Islands have remained largely untouched by human activity in the last 30 years. Lalor Island is closed to the public, but McNabs attracts thousands of visitors every year. They come here to explore its unspoilt natural beauty and history, to enjoy its wildlife, or to hike or kayak.
Where I am right now is at Green Hill Cove. It's in the southern end of the island. This is an environmental protection zone. It's home to a lot of wildlife, birds, and it's supposed to be a natural environment park. But there is more and more fishing debris that keeps getting washed up on McNabs. This is part of a lobster trap. This is really stuck in the rocks. It would take quite a bit of work to dig that out of here. And it's also wrapped up in amongst the tree stumps and the wood debris that's washed ashore. There's also a lot of other fishing related debris like oil containers and rope, an awful lot of rope that gets entangled everywhere, plastic debris. This particular piece here is a part of a lobster trap tag, and there's a date on it. It says 2006, and there's a number, so we could trace that particular tag to the trap. But whether it belonged to this trap or this one, who knows, because everything is all broken up in bits and pieces. So it's quite a mess, and because we're on such a rocky ground here, very hard to clean up.
The McNabs and Lawler Islands beach cleanup started in 1991, and since then, volunteers have collected approximately 500 bags of garbage every year. On the north end of the island, city garbage predominates. Single-use plastics like fast food containers, Tim Hortons cups, and tampon applicators from the sewage system. Here, as elsewhere on the island, dozens of large tires can be found. Some have broken loose from shipping wharfs where they are used for fendering. On the south end of the island, the majority of debris originates from the fishing industry. In addition to ghost gear, it includes other lost or discarded fishing-related material: styrofoam, broken wharfs, motor oil containers, plastic fish crates, lobster claw bands, and more besides.
This year, we're trying to deal with a lot of the marine debris, the ghost gear that washes up on McNabs Island. So we want to try and get all of this garbage out of here. And some of it could have been here for a very long time.
To assess the extent of the ghost gear problem, the Friends of McNabs Island summer staff surveyed the island's shoreline. Small fragments and lobster bands are found everywhere, but there are hot spots where large amounts of ghost gear, especially rope and lobster traps, accumulate.
It kind of ruins the aesthetic of the island because it is kind of a pristine coastline, because it is kind of inhabited. But it's of course a hazard to wildlife and humans. Another lobster trap. We found easily over 100 lobster traps along the coastline. Mostly they've been in areas kind of more exposed to the Atlantic Ocean. So some of the areas that we found are along Hangman's Beach, and then a lot on the southern tip of the island, Big Thumb Cap, and kind of further south.
The annual McNabs Island Beach cleanup was held in the fall. In recent years, a number of volunteer groups have formed to tackle the problem of beach garbage throughout Nova Scotia. But the McNabs cleanup is the oldest and remains the largest in Atlantic Canada. It attracts volunteers from all walks of life and all parts of Nova Scotia. The Friends of McNabs Island raise funds to cover the cost of transporting volunteers to the island by boat. But there is never enough funding to accommodate all the people who want to help out. In 2021, 90 volunteers took part, including individuals and families, as well as teams from local businesses, youth groups, and other organizations. Together, they collected 800 bags of garbage and approximately 80 lobster traps. Many parts of the shore cannot be reached by ATV or even by boat in most weather and sea conditions. As a result, most of the ghost gear can only be hauled out on foot. Volunteers must sometimes go to great lengths to remove old fishing gear or find creative ways to overcome natural obstacles. In difficult locations, garbage is brought to points that can be reached by ATV and trailer and hauled to Garrison Pier for transfer to a chartered fishing boat. In other locations, it is piled up for removal by barge.
It's really important that we find solutions so that we can help eliminate gear loss. Having gear in our ocean doesn't only cause, problems for our marine life, it also causes navigational hazards, it causes, all kinds of different ecosystem issues. It's something that we need to make sure that we can keep all waste out of our oceans.
In 2020, Fisheries and Oceans Canada launched a Ghost Gear Fund to support projects that retrieve lost fishing gear and other projects that provide effective ways to responsibly dispose of gear that has reached the end of its useful life.
Commercial fish harvesters really do not want to lose their gear. It's costly for them, and most of them do what they can to try to retrieve their gear.
Fishing gear is money. Lost gear is money. A harvester can lose anywhere between $200 per trap, anywhere when they get wiped out to $20,000 to $30,000. That is just traps alone. That's not counting your rope, your buoys, and your catch that they lost.
For the general public, I think the main concern is the environmental issues that it raises. First and foremost, this gear washes ashore and it creates marine pollution. It shouldn't be there. And over time, this gear continually breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces, creating microplastics, where the impacts to marine life and human health are still largely unknown. More and more research is coming out. But rope in particular does fragment quite easily into microthreads. And that could be a serious concern.
Loss of fishing gear is coming down a lot. Since the time I fished there, we gill netted, we never lost a net, but other fellows did. You know, they lose fleet after fleet after fleet. Well, I can't find my nets. They don't realize the tide takes them. Or somebody cuts their main moorings off.
When gear becomes lost, it often happens out of sight, and losses end up being unrecorded and unreported. And the more information we have, the more easily we're able to identify where gear is being lost and develop targeted solutions at a local scale that will be effective.
End-of-life fishing gear is gear that is no longer usable in the fishing industry. It's gear that has become weak and mangled and no longer safe to catch fish with. Wire lobster traps and fishing rope are the most difficult items to dispose of here in Atlantic Canada, along with fishing nets as well as dragging gear. In Nova Scotia alone, there is approximately 244,000 wire lobster traps that are disposed of annually, along with 1,100 tons of fishing rope.
Coastal Action is an environmental nonprofit based in Mahone Bay of Nova Scotia, and we work towards addressing environmental concerns in the region. In Nova Scotia, there's no province-wide fishing gear recycling system, and this can be a problem for fishers to responsibly dispose of their end-of-life gear. To tackle this problem, Coastal Action launched a rope collection and recycling system. For this pilot program, we placed disposal bins down at 9 wharves in the region where fishers could simply dispose of their end-of-life gear. We diverted 13 tons of rope from landfill and other disposal methods, and we're working with Sustain Technologies and several other Atlantic Canadian recycling companies to come up with novel rope recycling solutions.
Wire traps, we've been able to find some solutions. We have metal recyclers that exist here in Nova Scotia as well as New Brunswick that are interested in collecting wire traps.
And so I do believe within the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see, especially here in Atlantic Canada, more and more recycling initiatives for abandoned, lost, and discarded fishing gear, also before it even gets to that stage.
Moving forward, collaboration is the key. We all need to work together. Everyone, fishing associations, organizations, not-for-profits, government, industry, everyone needs to come together to find recycling solutions, to find multiple different options for make access available for our crafters, local community members that want to repurpose fishing gear.
So what you're seeing here is some different things that we sell out of stuff that we find during shoreline cleanup. So we take the rope that we find, and some of it's end-of-life fishing gear. So that's when the fishermen are done with it. We grab it from the wharf. These are probably one of our best sellers, rope mats. They're made 100% recycled or repurposed, end-of-life fishing gear or shoreline rope. We never ever buy new rope, and they're made by my wonderful husband Dean. He works hard. We make smalls and larges.
Communities do not want to see their pristine coastal environments deteriorating, but for the foreseeable future, When ghost gear comes ashore, its removal will remain in the hands of volunteer groups like the Friends of McNabs Island.
This garbage is costly to get rid of. It requires a lot of organization on our part to bring volunteers over to the island. There isn't a public ferry that can transport people to McNabs, so we have to rely on private boat charters. And then we have to hire boats to take the garbage off the island. We do get a lot of support from the community and from the volunteers, but it's still a very costly operation.